This happened about 6 years ago, Easter Sunday. I was 23. My roommate at the time, a guy named Derek, had this idea that we should do something outdoors for the long weekend. He'd found a campsite about 2 hours north of Columbus, up near some state forest land. Nothing fancy, just a clearing with a fire pit, a portable cooler, some cheap lawn chairs. We weren't serious campers. We just wanted to get out of the apartment for a couple days. Derek ended up backing out Friday night, something with his girlfriend, so it was just me. I almost didn't go, honestly. I sat in my car in the apartment parking lot for probably 10 minutes trying to decide. But I'd already packed everything, had a whole cooler of food. I had the weekend off work, so I drove up Saturday. Got there around noon, set up my tent, ate some chips and a sandwich, and that was basically my Saturday. Quiet, nothing interesting. I slept okay. Easter Sunday, I woke up around 7. It was cold for April, maybe 45 degrees, overcast. I made coffee on my little camp stove, ate 2 hard-boiled eggs I'd brought from home, and just sat there in the folding chair watching the tree line. It was fine. It was actually pretty nice. I decided around 9 that I'd take a walk on one of the trails. There was a loop marked on a laminated map posted at the trailhead, about 4 miles, supposed to take an hour and a half. I grabbed a water bottle, locked the car, and headed in. The first hour was normal. The trail was well-worn, easy to follow. I passed a creek, some old stone walls, left over from farmland that had been forested over, I guessed. I saw a deer about 30 yards off the path. That was the highlight. I was in a good mood. Then I stopped to check the map on my phone. No signal, but I'd screenshotted it, and I heard something behind me. Not an animal sound, just a branch. One branch snapping clean. The kind of sound a boot makes, not a hoof. I turned around, nothing. The path curved back behind me, and I couldn't see more than maybe 60 feet. I stood there for a few seconds, didn't hear anything else. I kept walking. 5 minutes later, I heard it again. Closer, I thought, but I wasn't sure. When you're alone in the woods, your brain starts doing stuff, making patterns. So I told myself it was a deer, kept walking, tried to pick up my pace a little without making it obvious, which is a weird thing to think when you're alone, right? Like, obvious to who? I came around a bend and there was a man standing in the middle of the trail. He was maybe 50 feet ahead, just standing there, facing me. He was wearing dark pants and a heavy coat, the kind that hunters wear, olive green, canvas looking. He had a beard, not a groomed one, the type you grow when you stop thinking about it. He was holding something at his side, but I couldn't make it out from that distance. Could have been a stick, could have been something else. He didn't move. I stopped walking and said, "Hey," just that. He didn't say anything back, didn't wave, didn't nod, just looked at me. I said, "Nice morning," which is a ridiculous thing to say, but your brain grabs for normal when something feels off. Still nothing. I stood there for probably 15 seconds. Then I said I was just heading back, that I'd taken a wrong turn, which was a lie, I hadn't. And I turned around and walked back the way I came. Not running, walking. I didn't want to run. I heard him start walking behind me maybe 30 seconds later. I know what footsteps sound like. I know the difference between someone walking parallel to a trail through the brush and someone on the trail itself. These were on the trail, and they were keeping pace. Every time I slowed down, they slowed. Every time I sped up, they sped up. I want to be clear about what I felt. It wasn't panic, not at first. It was more like everything went very flat, very focused, like my body just decided to stop doing anything except move forward. I wasn't thinking about who he was or what he wanted. I was thinking about the car. I knew I was maybe a mile and a half out. I ran the last mile. I didn't look back once. I kept waiting to hear him start running too, and about halfway back I did hear him pick up. Not sprinting, but a jog, steady, like he wasn't in a hurry because he didn't think he needed to be. I hit the trailhead and I ran straight to my car and got in and locked the door. My hands were shaking enough that I missed the ignition twice. I pulled out onto the access road and I just drove. I didn't break down camp, didn't get my tent, left the cooler sitting on the picnic table. I left all of it. I got about a mile down the access road and I passed a dark pickup truck pulled into a shallow turnaround in the trees. No plates on the front, engine off. I registered it without really registering it. My brain was still just moving. I got to the main road and turned south toward the highway, and I remember exhaling for what felt like the first time in 10 minutes. I drove maybe 4 miles and I checked my mirror. There was a dark truck behind me. I don't know if it was the same one. I want to be honest about that. I was scared and it was an overcast day and I hadn't looked at the truck closely when I passed it. I don't know the make or model. It was dark, black or navy, and it was a pickup. That's all I had. It followed me for 11 miles. I know because I watched the odometer. I pulled into a gas station in the first town I hit and the truck drove past without stopping. I sat in that gas station parking lot for 40 minutes. I went inside and bought a coffee I didn't drink. The woman behind the counter asked if I was okay and I said, yeah, just a long drive. I've thought about this a lot since then. What he wanted, whether he was just some guy who happened to be walking the same trail, whether the truck was even him. Probably it was nothing. People hike in state forests, people drive pickup trucks. But he never said a word, not one word, and I've never been able to get that image out of my head. Him just standing there in the middle of the trail, in the trees, on Easter Sunday, watching me come toward him like he'd been waiting, like he already knew I was coming. A couple years back, I was living in a quiet neighborhood just outside of Columbus, Ohio. It was one of those middle-class areas where everybody mowed their lawns on Saturday and waved at each other from the driveway. Nothing ever happened there. That's why what went down on Easter Sunday still messes with me. My buddy Ryan had invited a few of us over to his place for a low-key Easter thing, nothing fancy. He said his girlfriend was making ham, there'd be some sides, and a couple of beers if we wanted. I didn't have any other plans, so I told him, yeah, I'd swing by around 2. The weather that day was typical April, cloudy and a little chilly, but not raining. I remember because I almost wore a heavier jacket and then changed my mind at the last second. I showed up with a 6-pack of something cheap and a bag of chips. Ryan's girlfriend, Sarah, had the tables set up in the dining room with those little plastic Easter eggs scattered around for no real reason. There were about 8 of us total. Most of them I knew from work or through Ryan, but there was one guy I'd never met before. His name was Derek. Derek was Sarah's cousin or something like that. He was tall, maybe 6'3", skinny in a way that made his clothes hang loose on him. He had this patchy beard that looked like he'd started growing it and then gave up halfway.
He didn't say much at first, just sat there picking at his plate of ham and deviled eggs, nodding along when someone talked.
We were all just eating and bullshitting about normal stuff. Work, the weather, how the Buckeyes were doing that season. At one point, Ryan asked me how my job at the warehouse was going. I told him it was the same old thing, long hours, sore back, but the pay wasn't bad. Derek looked up from his plate and asked, "You work nights or days?" "Mostly days," I said. "Why?" He shrugged. "Just wondering. I work nights sometimes, security." That was pretty much the only thing he said directly to me for a while, but I started noticing him watching me. Not staring exactly, just looking longer than normal whenever I spoke. I figured maybe he was shy or awkward. A lot of people are like that. After we finished eating, we moved out to the backyard. Ryan had a fire pit going, even though it wasn't that cold. Someone brought out a Bluetooth speaker and put on some music, nothing loud. I was sitting on one of the plastic chairs drinking my second beer when Derek pulled up a chair next to me, closer than he needed to. "So, you got a girlfriend?" he asked. The question came out of nowhere. I paused for a second. "Nah, not right now." He nodded slowly, like he was thinking it over. "That's cool. You seem like a nice guy, easy to talk to." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just kind of mumbled, "Thanks, man." Then he leaned in a little. "If you ever want to grab coffee or something, I know a place not far from here. They do good lattes." I felt my stomach do that little flip you get when someone crosses a line you didn't see coming. I'm not into dudes, and even if I was, the way he said it felt off. Too direct, too fast. I laughed it off, the nervous kind of laugh. "Appreciate it, but I'm good. Kind of focusing on work right now." He didn't push it right then, just sat back and stared into the fire. But the rest of the afternoon, every time I looked up, he was either watching me or pretending not to. When I went inside to grab another drink, he followed a minute later and stood in the kitchen doorway while I opened the fridge. "You sure you don't want to exchange numbers?" he asked quietly. "Just in case?" I closed the fridge. "Yeah, I'm sure. Thanks, though." He nodded again, that same slow nod, and walked back outside without saying anything else. By the time the sun started going down, I was ready to head home. I said my goodbyes, gave Ryan and Sarah a quick hug, and told everyone I had an early shift the next day. Derek was sitting on the couch when I left. He didn't say anything, just watched me walk out the door. I got in my car, a beat-up silver Honda Civic, and pulled out of Ryan's driveway. The neighborhood was quiet. Most houses had their porch lights on already. I turned left onto the main road and then right onto the highway ramp that would take me toward my apartment about 20 minutes away. About 5 miles in, I noticed headlights behind me. Nothing unusual at first, lots of people on the road. But after I took my exit, the same pair of headlights stayed with me. They were high up, like from an SUV or a truck. I made a couple turns through my neighborhood, the kind you make when you're almost home. The headlights followed every single one. I started to feel that prickly feeling on the back of my neck. I told myself I was being paranoid. Easter Sunday, people visiting family, probably just someone who lived nearby. Still, I took a longer route, looping around the block once. The car stayed right there, 2 car lengths back, no matter what I did. When I finally pulled into my apartment complex, I parked in my usual spot under the street light. The other car slowed down but didn't stop. It rolled past the entrance, then turned around at the end of the street and came back. This time it parked across the lot, maybe 50 yards away, engine still running. I sat in my car for a minute, keys in my hand, watching in the rear view mirror. The windows on the other car were tinted dark. I couldn't see inside. After about 30 seconds, I got out and walked fast toward my building. I heard the other engine shut off. Then a car door opened and closed. I didn't look back. I just kept walking, swiped my key fob at the lobby door, and went straight to the elevator. My apartment was on the 3rd floor. Once I was inside, I locked the deadbolt and the chain, then went to the window that overlooked the parking lot. The car was still there, same spot. No one got out. I told myself it was nothing. Maybe Derek lived in the area. Maybe it was just coincidence. I turned on the TV, made some leftover pasta from the night before, and tried to shake it off. But every 10 minutes or so, I'd go back to the window. The car hadn't moved. Around 11 that night, I saw the driver's side door open. A tall figure stepped out. Even from 3 floors up and under shitty parking lot lights, I could tell it was Derek. Same height, same loose clothes, same way of standing there like he didn't know what to do with his hands. He stood next to his car for a long time, just looking up at the building. Then he started walking toward the entrance. I watched him try the lobby door. It was locked, of course. He pulled on it a couple times, then stepped back and looked up again, scanning the windows. I backed away from my own window so he wouldn't see the blinds move. My heart was beating hard now, not from fear exactly, but from that heavy, sick feeling you get when you realize someone you barely know knows exactly where you live. I called Ryan. He picked up on the 3rd ring, sounding half asleep. "Hey man, what's up?" I kept my voice low. "That guy Derek, does he know where I live?" Ryan paused. "What? No, why would he?" "Because he's standing outside my apartment building right now." There was a longer silence. "Wait, seriously?" "Yeah, he followed me home from your place. He's been sitting in the parking lot for hours." Ryan swore under his breath. "That's fucked up. You want me to call the cops?" I thought about it. "Not yet. He hasn't done anything illegal, just creepy." We talked for a few more minutes. Ryan said he'd text Sarah and ask if she knew anything about Derek's past. I hung up and went back to the window. Derek was gone from the front door, but his car was still there. I didn't sleep much that night. Every little noise in the hallway made me sit up. Around 3 in the morning, I checked again. The car was finally gone. The next day at work, I was dragging. I kept checking my phone, half expecting a message from an unknown number. Nothing came. When I got home that evening, there was no strange car in the lot. I started to think maybe it was a one-time thing. Weird guy, bad social skills, took rejection hard. End of story. But 2 days later, on Tuesday, I noticed the same dark SUV parked across the street from my building when I got home from work. Not in the lot this time, just on the public road, facing my apartment. I couldn't see inside, but I knew. I started varying my routine, different routes home, parking in different spots. One night I left my car at a friend's place and took an Uber back. Still, every few days, the car would show up, sometimes in the lot, sometimes across the street. Always at night, always with the engine off after a while. I never saw Derek get out again after that first time. He just sat there, waiting, watching which lights turned on. Ryan eventually told me what Sarah found out. Derek had done this before, not exactly the same, but close. He'd gotten fixated on a girl he met at a family gathering a couple years earlier.
followed her around, showed up at her job. Nothing violent, but enough that the family had quietly stopped inviting him to things. Sarah felt bad she hadn't warned us. I thought about moving. I even looked at a couple apartments on the other side of town. But the lease, the cost, the hassle, it all added up, so I stayed. It's been over a year now. The car still shows up sometimes, not every week, but often enough that I notice the pattern, usually around holidays or on Sundays, like he remembers that Easter. I don't answer the door if someone knocks and I'm not expecting anyone. I keep my blinds closed most of the time, and once in a while when I'm driving home after dark, I check the rear view mirror more than I used to. Most nights the road behind me is empty, but not every night, and that's the part that stays with me, the not knowing when it'll be one of those nights again, the way an ordinary Easter dinner turned into this quiet, slow thing that follows me around. No big confrontation, no dramatic chase, just a guy who wouldn't take no for an answer, and the headlights that keep showing up when I least expect them. I still live in the same apartment, still work the same job, but I don't go to Ryan's house for holidays anymore, and honestly, I don't think I ever will.
My friend Caitlin had been talking about this place in Midtown for weeks. Some spot that did a big Easter buffet, bottomless mimosas, the whole thing. There were 6 of us. Me, Caitlin, her boyfriend Marcus, our friend Deja, and 2 guys from Marcus's job that none of us girls really knew. One of them was named Tyler. The other one introduced himself as Drew. Drew was the one. We got there around noon. The weather was that specific kind of April that feels almost too nice, like 68 degrees, light breeze, everybody's in a good mood. We got a table near the window. I remember they had little pastel centerpieces on every table, fake eggs in a basket, the kind of decoration that costs nothing but makes a place feel festive. I ordered the Eggs Benedict and a coffee. Drew sat across from me. That part wasn't my choice. Marcus arranged the seats without really thinking about it, I guess, and by the time I noticed, everyone was already settled. At first, he seemed fine. Quiet, kind of awkward, but fine. He laughed at the right moments. He asked me what I did for work, and I told him I was in logistics, and he nodded like that meant something to him. Normal stuff. Then about 40 minutes in, he asked for my number. I said I wasn't ready dating right now, which is the thing you say. He said, okay, totally, no worries, and went back to his food. I figured that was that. But then, maybe 10 minutes later, he asked again. Not in a pushy way, almost casual. He just said, I feel like we have a similar energy, I really think you should reconsider. I looked at Caitlin. She was mid-conversation with Deja and didn't catch it. I said, I'm good, thanks, and turned toward the window. He didn't say anything after that, just kind of smiled and ate his food. And I don't know how to explain this exactly, but the smile bothered me more than the question did. It was patient, like he was just waiting for something. We stayed another hour, had dessert. They did this thing with little carrot cake bites on a tiered tray. And eventually people started doing that thing where they're checking their phones and putting on jackets. Bill came. Drew offered to cover my portion. I said I had it. He said, I know you do. I just wanted to. I paid for myself. In the parking lot, everyone said their goodbyes. Caitlin hugged me, told me she'd text me later. Marcus shook hands with Tyler and Drew. Drew looked at me when he said bye. Not in a threatening way, just held the eye contact a beat longer than normal. I got in my car and didn't think about it too hard. I drove home. It was about 25 minutes from Midtown to my apartment, mostly highway with a surface street at the end. I had the radio on.
one of those stations doing an Easter playlist, which is a very specific kind of strange, hearing contemporary pop songs mixed in with hymns. I stopped at a Walgreens on the way home to grab some Advil and a bottle of water. Spent maybe 7 minutes inside. When I came out and got back on the road, I noticed a silver sedan behind me. That's not unusual, it's a road, but when I turned onto my street, it turned too. I live on a residential block, not a through street. There's no real reason to be on it unless you live there or you're visiting someone there. I pulled into my usual spot and the silver sedan slowed down, almost to a stop, and then kept going to the end of the block and turned right. I sat in my car for a second. I told myself it was nothing. Somebody visiting a neighbor, wrong turn, whatever. I went inside, changed out of my dress, ate some crackers 'cause the mimosas had made me feel weird, and called my mom for Easter. Normal afternoon. Around 7 that evening, I went back down to my car to grab the Walgreens bag I'd left on the passenger seat. And when I got outside, there was a folded piece of paper under my windshield. I stood there for a second before I touched it. It was a note, handwritten, blue ink, neat letters. It said, "I think you're worth the effort, D." That's all. I looked up and down the street, nobody there. Just parked cars and the sound of somebody's TV through an open window down the block. I went back inside and called Caitlin. She answered on the third ring, and I told her about the note. And she was quiet for a second, and then she said, "Wait, he followed you home?" I said I didn't know for sure. She said she'd text Marcus and find out what his deal was. Marcus apparently said Drew was a good guy, little intense, meant well. He apologized and said he'd talk to him. That was the answer. That was the resolution everyone seemed satisfied with. But here's the thing that I keep coming back to, and this is the part that genuinely does not let me go. I never told anyone where I was parked. We all arrived separately. My car, a gray Civic, is not distinctive. There were probably 40 cars in that lot. He would have had to watch where I parked when I arrived. He would have had to hold that information for 2.5 hours, through the whole meal, through the whole normal conversation about jobs and Easter plans and carrot cake. He would have had to follow me out of the parking lot without me noticing, follow me the whole way home, watch me pull into my spot, write a note, leave it, and disappear. All of that because I wouldn't give him my number. I ended up moving my car to a different block after that. I started checking before I got in. I still do, honestly. Not every time, but often enough that it's become a habit I don't think about anymore. That's the weird part. You just absorb things like that. They become routine. Marcus said Drew left the city a few months later. Job opportunity, apparently. I don't know if that's true. I don't know Drew's last name. I never asked. I think about that smile sometimes. The patient one. The one that looked like he already knew how something was gonna go. I still don't know what he thought was gonna happen.